The planet was silent, a vast wasteland of endless dust and rocks. Once a thriving world, it was now nothing more than a forgotten graveyard. Among the ruins, a single figure moved slowly, an abandoned soldier, the last human alive on this forsaken place. Her name was Mara, and she had been left behind when the war took a turn for the worse. Her ship, damaged and lifeless, had crashed months ago. No one had come looking for her. The fleet had already moved on, leaving this planet behind as they focused on the bigger battles. They didn't think she would survive. They didn't care. In their eyes, she was expendable, just another pawn in a war that had already claimed so many lives. But Mara wasn't dead. Not yet. The wind bit at her skin, and the sun, cold and distant, burned overhead. The world was unforgiving, but Mara had survived so far. The only thing keeping her alive was the fire inside her, the refusal to let this lifeless planet be her grave. Each day, she scoured the wreckage of the ship, searching for any supplies that could help her. There was nothing left but scraps, and yet she knew every piece could be useful. Her body was weakening, but her determination never wavered. She had no choice but to keep going, to survive, even if it meant living in a dead world. The silence was deafening. But then, just as Mara was about to give up hope, she heard it. A sound. A low hum, coming from somewhere deep beneath the planet's surface. Was she imagining it? Or was there something, or someone, out there? Her heart raced. She couldn't be sure. The signal was faint, but it was there. Perhaps it was a sign, some kind of rescue beacon from the fleet. But she knew better than to get her hopes up. After all, they had left her to die. The hum grew louder, more distinct. Mara's eyes narrowed as she turned toward the source. Whatever it was her only chance. She had nothing left to lose. Mara moved cautiously through the barren landscape, her every step kicking up dust that seemed to never settle. The world around her was still, too still. It felt like a place abandoned by life itself, where time had forgotten to move forward. Her feet dragged as she walked, but her mind remained sharp. She knew she had to keep moving. Sitting still was just a slower way of dying. Her body ached from the constant search for food, water, and shelter. Every day, she faced the same struggles, finding clean water from the dry rivers, scavenging for any food she could find, and protecting herself from the harsh environment. The sun above felt relentless, as though it wanted to burn her to the ground. But today was different. Today, she could feel it in the air. Something was changing. The faint humming sound she had first heard days ago had grown louder. It wasn't her imagination. It was real. Something was down there, beneath the surface. Mara's instinct screamed at her to investigate, but caution kept her feet planted. She had to be careful. She had seen enough horror in the war to know that nothing was ever as it seemed. What if it was a trap? What if there were others, enemies, waiting for her to make a mistake? But then again, she had no other options. Her chances of survival were running out fast. If the signal was from another human outpost, or perhaps even a rescue team, it could be the only chance she had left. Mara gathered what little strength she had and started toward the origin of the sound. The land was rugged, filled with deep cracks and jagged rocks. As she moved, she stumbled, but she quickly regained her balance. Her mind was focused entirely on that hum. It was like a lifeline pulling her forward. After what felt like hours, she finally reached the spot. A large, metal structure half buried in the ground lay before her. She had no idea what it was, but it looked old, ancient even. The humming was now a steady vibration beneath her feet, and her heart began to race, with both fear and excitement. She reached out, her hand brushing against the metal surface. It was warm to the touch, almost alive. And then, without warning, the ground beneath her feet began to shift. The hum intensified, and the metal doors slowly creaked open. Mara hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. What was this place? And what secrets did it hold? Mara's breath caught in her throat as the metal doors creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground, pulling her in like a magnet. For a moment, her instincts screamed at her to run. What if this was a trap? What if whatever was waiting inside was worse than the cold, empty world she had been surviving on? But the need for answers, for a way off this dying planet, overpowered her fear. She had nothing left to lose. With a quick, shaky breath, Mara stepped into the dark. The air inside was thick, stale, and damp. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she could make out the outline of walls covered in rust and dust, a place long forgotten by time. The hum was louder now, almost deafening. It seemed to come from deep within the structure, leading her down a narrow, winding corridor. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the place itself were alive. Mara's footsteps echoed in the silence as she crept forward. She had no idea what she was walking into, but the faint hope that something, anything, might help her escape this lifeless world kept her moving. She passed old control panels, flickering with a faint green light and strange alien symbols that she couldn't understand. The deeper she went, the more the sense of dread settled in her chest. And then she saw it. At the end of the corridor, there was a large chamber, filled with machines that hummed in perfect unison. In the center stood a towering figure, a hologram, flickering in and out of existence. It was humanoid in shape, but something about it felt wrong. Its eyes glowed bright, and a voice, mechanical and cold, suddenly filled the room. "Welcome, survivor," it said, its voice echoing off the walls. "You were the last of your kind." Mara froze, her heart pounding. The voice was coming from the hologram, but it felt like it was coming from everywhere. The words hit her hard, like a punch to the gut. She was alone. Really alone. There was no one left. "Who are you?" Mara demanded, her voice trembling. "What is this place?" The hologram paused, its glowing eyes studying her. "This is an old military base," it replied. "A place of great power, a weapon designed to end a war that your people lost. They abandoned you here, left you to die." Mara's mind spun. The truth slammed into her. The war, the betrayal. She had known something was off, but hearing it from this machine made it real. Her own people had left her to die on this planet, and now she was the last one standing. But the hologram wasn't done. "If you choose," it continued, "you can take up the mantle of revenge. You can use the weapon here to fight back. The war is not over, and you, Mara, can change the outcome." Her heart raced. The words hung in the air, thick with possibilities. Revenge, power, the chance to take everything back. But at what cost? Was she ready to destroy everything her people had fought for, or had they already done that to themselves? "Do you accept?" the voice asked, its tone almost inviting. Mara's mind raced. The weight of the decision crushed her chest. Would she become the weapon they wanted her to be, or would she turn away from the hate that had been planted in her heart? Mara stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The hologram's words echoed in her mind. "You can change the outcome. You can take up the mantle of revenge." It felt like a promise, a deadly temptation, calling her to embrace the power that could reshape the war. But the choice was hers. For a long moment, she simply stood there, her mind racing. The war had already cost her everything. The people she loved, the future she had hoped for. Her planet was lost, her comrades gone. She had been left to die, abandoned to a planet that offered nothing but death. But now, there was something different, something she hadn't expected. A chance to make them all pay. But could she really do it? Could she become the weapon they had abandoned her to be? The air in the chamber seemed to grow heavier as she thought about the consequences. This weapon, this power, could bring her enemies to their knees. It could end the war, but it could also destroy the last remnants of humanity, the people she had once fought beside. Her mind flashed to her family, to her friends, to the faces of the soldiers who had died beside her. Were they all just pawns in a game they didn't understand? Or had they truly believed they were fighting for something worth protecting? The hum of the machines grew louder, urging her, pushing her forward. "You must decide." The voice was cold, almost indifferent. There was no mercy here, just power, and the consequences that came with it. Mara finally stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch one of the consoles. The metal was warm beneath her fingers, as if it were alive, waiting for her command. The machine flickered, lights flashing, as the room seemed to come alive. The AI had already started processing her decision, running calculations, preparing the weapons. Suddenly, the walls around her began to shift. Hidden doors opened, revealing large platforms, weapons, and technology that Mara could barely comprehend. This was no ordinary facility. It was a weapon, a force capable of reshaping the war in ways no one had ever imagined. She had thought the planet was barren, but now she saw the truth. The weapons beneath the surface, the traps, the technologies, all of it had been waiting for someone to take control. And now, that someone was her. As she looked around, a deep sense of determination settled in her chest. There was no turning back. She was no longer the helpless soldier abandoned by her people. She was something more now, a force to be reckoned with. "I accept," she whispered to the empty room. Her voice echoed, and in that moment, everything changed. The machines hummed louder, and the world around her began to transform. The once lifeless planet was coming alive, a battlefield being forged under her command. Her enemies would come, she knew that. But they wouldn't recognize the world they were about to enter. This was no longer just a planet. It was a weapon, and it would destroy them all. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the planet began to shift, the once dying world now awakening. Mara stood at the heart of it all, watching as the ancient machinery hummed with newfound power. The weapons, hidden beneath the surface for centuries, were now fully operational. The air was thick with energy, and the earth itself seemed to rise up in defiance of the enemies who had once abandoned her. Her decision had been made. There was no going back. Mara knew the cost of what she had just unleashed. She had chosen revenge, chosen to use the planet's power to change the course of the war. But with that choice came a terrifying realization. The weapon was not just a tool for destruction. It was a force of nature, capable of reshaping everything, for better or worse. The first wave of enemy ships arrived a few days later. Their sleek advanced vessels pierced the atmosphere, descending toward the planet's surface with military precision. They had no idea what awaited them. As the enemy forces landed, Mara's hands moved swiftly, activating the systems she had uncovered in the depths of the old base. The sky above darkened as massive storms gathered, fierce winds howling through the barren landscape. Then, the ground shook violently. Hidden turrets, once dormant, sprang to life, firing at the enemy ships with deadly accuracy. Massive defense walls rose from the ground like giant sentinels, blocking the advancing forces. The enemy was unprepared. They had expected a weak, lifeless world, an easy target. But Mara had turned it into a living nightmare. The battlefield she had awakened was unlike any they had ever seen. The planet itself fought back, its traps and weapons tearing into the enemy's forces, forcing them to retreat into chaos. But Mara wasn't done. She had more tricks up her sleeve. She activated the final weapon, a massive cannon hidden deep within the planet's core. It took a moment for the power to build, but when it fired, the blast was like nothing the enemy had ever experienced. The shockwave rippled through the atmosphere, tearing apart the enemy fleet as if it were nothing more than paper. Mara watched from the control room, her eyes cold as the enemy ships fell from the sky, burning in a brilliant fireball. She could almost feel their panic, their desperation as they realized too late that they had walked into a trap she had set with her own hands. But despite the victory, a part of her felt empty. She had avenged the betrayal. But what cost? The battlefield was now littered with the wreckage of human lives, her own people, the ones she had once fought alongside. She had become what they had feared. She had become a force of destruction. The war was far from over. The enemy would regroup, and there would be more battles to fight. But for now, Mara stood alone on a planet she had transformed into a weapon. The silence returned, only broken by the distant hum of the machines. She had changed the world, but she wasn't sure if it was for the better. She had become the last hope for a future that might never come.